Close your eyes. Picture the Sahara. Right now, if you were standing here, you would be dying. A brutal, endless ocean of sand under a sky that is completely on fire. 9 million square kilometers of sand, stone, and silence. Nothing grows. Almost nothing moves. Stand in the middle of it long enough, and it will kill you. Quietly, patiently, the way deserts always have. The sun is a blinding, merciless weight, baking every grain of dust until the ground radiates heat like a stove. But the desert is lying to you. Because this exact spot, this dune, this dead horizon, was once the most crowded, most violent, most alive place on the entire planet. Imagine sinking, not into desert dunes, but into the heavy, warm mud of an ancient riverbed 95 million years in the past. The air is thick and humid, choked by giant trees that dwarf office buildings. You are completely exposed, and you are being hunted by a giant. This was the Green Sahara, a thriving, watery paradise deleted from the map of history. Today, we step into the shadows of this lost world to uncover the terrifying secret of how an entire ecosystem vanished without a trace. Let's set the scene properly. In the late Cretaceous, the map of Africa was unrecognizable. The continent hadn't fully split from South America yet. They were still tearing apart, and the wound between them was filling with warm ocean. Rivers the size of the modern Nile braided across what is now Morocco, Algeria, and Niger, dumping into shallow tropical seas. There was no desert. There was water everywhere. The air was thick, humid, heavy, hard to breathe by our standards, rich with oxygen and rot and pollen. Giant conifers, the Araucaria, punched up through a low canopy of ferns and cycads. Their relatives still exist today. You might know them as the monkey puzzle tree, but back then they were giants, and the fog pooled around their trunks like smoke. This was not a gentle Eden. It was a floodplain, a place of drowning seasons and drying seasons, of mud that could swallow an animal whole. And everything that lived here had to be built for water. Take this thing. This is Nigersaurus, and it has, without exaggeration, one of the strangest faces in the history of life. Most long-necked dinosaurs reached up to feed. Nigersaurus did the opposite. Its skull was so light it was almost see-through, and its mouth was a wide, flat, straight-edged blade. Picture the front of a lawnmower or the head of a vacuum cleaner. It held over 500 teeth, stacked in rows, constantly being replaced. A single tooth lasted about 2 weeks before it wore out, and a fresh one rotated up behind it. It didn't chew, it mowed. Head down, sweeping side to side, shearing the ground cover flat like a living harvester. In a world with no grass, this was one solution to the problem of eating an entire floodplain, and it worked for millions of years. But an animal that spends its whole life with its head down, in the open, near water, is an animal that something else is watching. And here it is, Spinosaurus. At up to 15 meters long, it is the largest predatory dinosaur ever discovered. Longer than Tyrannosaurus rex, longer than a school bus. But length is the least interesting thing about it, because Spinosaurus broke the rules. Every apex predator dinosaur you can name was built to hunt on land. Spinosaurus was built to hunt in water. It had a long, narrow, crocodile-like snout studded with conical teeth, perfect not for slicing flesh, but for snapping shut on something slippery. Its nostrils sat high on its skull. Its bones were dense, like a hippo's, to kill its own buoyancy and let it sink. And rising from its back was that impossible sail, nearly 2 meters tall, a structure we still argue about today. Display? Temperature control? rudder through the water? Maybe all three. This was a river monster, and the river was full of food. The rivers of the Green Sahara held fish that were nightmares in their own right. Anthropristis was a sawfish the size of a small boat, its snout lined with a row of barbed spikes. Coelacanths bigger than a person. Lungfish, rays, and armored predatory fish everywhere. For most hunters, this was inaccessible, a buffet behind glass. For Spinosaurus, it was dinner. Picture it, the sail cutting the surface like a black sail on a ship, the animal drifting, patient, its high-set eyes just above the waterline. A shape moves below, and then an explosion of water and mud, jaws snapping sideways through the murk, the whole river erupting for half a second before falling silent again. Nothing else in the ecosystem could touch this niche. Spinosaurus had the water almost entirely to itself. Almost. Because there was one thing in that river that even a 15-meter predator had to respect. Sarcosuchus, the flesh crocodile. Over 10 meters long, weighing as much as 8 tons, with a skull nearly the length of a grown man and an estimated bite force that could crush bone like wet chalk. It didn't chase, it waited. Half sunk in the shallows, motionless for hours, indistinguishable from a floating log, until something came to drink. A young Spinosaurus, a Nigersaurus at the water's edge, anything careless enough to get close. Then the stillness ended, all at once, and it was over before the prey understood what had happened. This is the part people miss about the Green Sahara. It wasn't just big, it was dense. A stacked, saturated ecosystem where giants ate giants, where the water was more dangerous than the land, and where nothing that lived here died of old age. For millions of years, this world simply ran. Wet season, dry season, flood, drought, hunt, repeat. It was one of the richest predator ecosystems the planet has ever assembled. And then it was gone. Nothing killed the Green Sahara in a single day. It was slower and stranger than that. The continents kept drifting. The seas that fed those rivers retreated. Africa rotated north, and over tens of millions of years, the rains that had built this whole world began to fail. The rivers thinned, the floodplains cracked, the Araucaria forest receded, then vanished. What had been a drowned jungle became a plain, then a scrubland, then, finally, the sand you started this video standing on. The monsters were long gone before the first grain of that sand was laid. Their bones sank into the old riverbeds, hardened and waited. Today, paleontologists pull them out of the Kim cliffs of Morocco and the rock of Niger, a super predator's jaw, a sail, a mouthful of 500 teeth, the fossilized receipts of a world that no longer has a place on any map. There are survivors if you know where to look. The baobab and the acacia still hold water in a landscape that punishes them for it. Distant echoes of an Africa that was once entirely green. So the next time you see a photograph of the Sahara, that endless, empty, golden nothing, remember what it's hiding. It wasn't always a desert. It was a river full of giants. And one day, the world it belongs to now will be just as unrecognizable as the one it buried. Everything ends. The only question is, what will leave in the rock for whoever digs us up next. If you want to keep walking through the Africa that time forgot, subscribe. Next time, we go somewhere even stranger. What would you rather face in that river? The sail or the thing waiting in the mud? Tell me below.